Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unraveling a classic, deeply cultural folktale. It's a story packed with deception, pure survival, and the absolutely inescapable power of fate. We're looking at a narrative that has been passed down through generations, one that really digs into the profound depths of human cruelty, but also highlights the incredible, unbelievable resilience of the human spirit. It's the story of two young girls, Aisha and Safia. Their lives get violently upended, only to be steered toward an ending you honestly wouldn't believe.
But hey, before we get into the actual events of the story, we've got to understand the core theme driving this entire narrative, and that is takdir, which loosely translates to destiny or fate. It's this deeply held belief that life's events and its ultimate outcomes are just preordained by a higher power. You see, this whole story hinges on a beautiful poetic irony, the fact that a cruel, calculated attempt to destroy two innocent girls actually became the exact mechanism that sealed their royal destiny. So keep this concept of takdir in the back of your mind as we follow their journey. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the stepmother's cruel deception. So our narrative kicks off right before the father, a wealthy merchant named Akram Khan, arrives home. He's been traveling for trade for 3 long years. But just before he walks through the door, his new wife corners his 2 innocent girls. She outright threatens them, saying, "If any work is left incomplete, don't complain later, you know my temper." We see her absolute cruelty front and center from day one. She rules these terrified kids through sheer fear and starvation. The source material tells us they were surviving on literally nothing but dry bread, working themselves to the bone just to appease her endless, crazy demands. And here is where we see the horrific disconnect between what the father is told and what is actually going on. The second the husband walks through the door, the stepmother just launches into these wild accusations. Before he even has a chance to look at his kids, she claims they're disobedient, that they wander the village all day, and get this, she even accuses them of being thieves. Meanwhile, the heartbreaking reality is that we have 2 terrified, starving, hardworking girls who have never once stepped out of line. But here's the real kicker. The father blindly believes his wife's lies. He doesn't even give his own daughters a chance to defend themselves. He perfectly sets the stage for a totally devastating betrayal.
So that brings us to Section 2, abandoned in the forest. Deciding he's just not going to tolerate this fabricated bad behavior, the father takes matters into his own hands. He tricks the girls, telling them they're going on a trip to their aunt's house, but instead he marches them deep, deep into the uncharted wilderness. Once they hit this dense patch of berry bushes, he pretends to be exhausted, tells the girls to go pick berries, and then sets this incredibly elaborate and cruel trap. First, he plants his wooden walking stick into the ground and pops his recognizable hat right on top of it, making a little decoy silhouette. Next, he spots a wild monkey up in the trees and bribes it with a bunch of bananas. Finally, as the monkey eats, it naturally mimics the last phrase the father was yelling out to the girls. Using this auditory and visual cover, the father literally sneaks away, heading back to the village all by himself.
So picture this. As the girls are picking berries, they just keep hearing this voice echoing through the trees. Chuno bedio, bab karahe, which means, keep picking daughters, your father is here. This haunting, repetitive echo of the monkey mimicking the father's voice kept the girls completely distracted. They felt safe. They just kept picking until, eventually, the bananas ran out and the monkey went dead silent. When the girls finally ran back to check on their dad, all they found was a stick, a hat, and the crushing realization that they had been completely abandoned, left behind to die. But here's where the story pivots from a tragedy into an amazing tale of resilience. Section 3, Surviving the Wilderness. The girls quickly realize, hey, no prince is coming to rescue us. Aisha steps up, realizing they have to rely 100% on themselves. And we've got to ask this immense life-or-death question. How in the world do 2 young girls survive alone in a predator-filled jungle? Well, as the sun sets and the terrifying sounds of the wild start getting louder, they bravely venture deeper into the woods, and they stumble upon an absolute miracle. A small, abandoned hut that even has a functioning stove. It gives them a secure, safe shelter to survive that harrowing first night.
Now fast forward a bit, and their lives completely transform. Day 1 was literally just about sheer survival, finding that hut. But months later, they've learned to forage, they've adapted, they've figured out how to actually live sustainably off the jungle's resources. Then we jump to years later, and they aren't just surviving anymore, they are thriving. These once frightened kids have grown into incredibly capable, strikingly beautiful young women who've built a totally self-sustaining life. They even start journeying safely to the edge of the village market to sell the fresh fruit they've gathered.
But look, despite all their success, the trauma of their father's betrayal definitely lingers, especially for the younger sister, Safia. She develops this deep, agonizing fear of losing her older sister, who is literally her only family left in the whole world. Seeing this, Aisha makes a crucial promise. She tells her, "If I ever disappear, I will leave a sign for you." It sounds like a simple, comforting thing to say in the moment, right? But this specific promise is the exact thread that's going to save them both later on.
And that perfectly transitions us to Section 4, the royal encounter.
So this is where Takdir, destiny, grabs the steering wheel again. The king's wazir happens to be hunting in that exact same jungle. He shoots a rabbit and goes wandering through the dense trees, desperately searching for a fire. He finds the hut and asks to use the sister's stove, but he is just so utterly mesmerized by Safia's striking beauty that he completely loses his mind. I mean, he stares at her for so long that his prized rabbit actually burns into a totally inedible lump of coal right on the stove. Safia fiercely chases this bumbling, distracted guy away with an axe. But this accidental, kind of hilarious encounter? It sets off a massive, life-altering chain reaction.
The wazir realizes, oh boy, I am in huge trouble here. The king is waiting for his meal and the wazir is coming back totally empty-handed. To save his own skin from the king's legendary bad temper, the terrified wazir rushes back with the wildest excuse. He tells the king, "I saw a beauty that made me forget the entire world." He hypes up this gorgeous woman he saw in the woods to such an astronomical degree that the king completely forgets how hungry he is. His curiosity is totally piqued.
So the king is intrigued, right? He demands to go see this incredible woman for himself. But, and here is a massive twist of fate, when the king goes to investigate the hut the very next day, Safia is out foraging. He doesn't see Safia at all. Instead, he spots the older sister, Ayesha. And wouldn't you know it, just like the wazir promised, the king takes one look at her and immediately loses his senses over her unparalleled beauty. He decides right then and there, on the spot, that he has to marry her.
Which brings us to our next chapter. Section 5, A Trail of Destiny.
The king wastes absolutely no time. The very next morning, while Safia is once again away gathering fruit deep in the jungle, the royal baraat, this grand, majestic wedding procession, arrives right at the sisters' tiny hut, and the wazir formally presents the proposal. Talk about a whirlwind. Overwhelmed by the fact that she, a girl thrown out like literal garbage, is now being asked to be queen, Aisha tearfully accepts, but as she's being rushed into the palanquin, she suddenly remembers the promise she made to Safia. So she runs back inside, grabs a huge handful of raw mustard seeds from their pantry, and as the royal procession carries her away toward the palace, Aisha secretly drops those tiny seeds, one by one, along the dirt path. Just a brilliant, brilliant backup plan executed right before being whisked away to a totally new life.
And that leads us to the emotional climax of our explainer. Section 6, The Final Reunion. So a heartbroken Safia returns from the jungle to find an empty hut. Absolute panic sets in. She waits for 2 agonizing days, crying, searching, and deeply fearing that her absolute worst nightmare has come true and she's lost her sister forever. But hey, remember what we said about Takdir? About destiny? It wasn't just human intervention at play here. During those 2 days, a heavy, totally unseasonal rain falls over the jungle. The water hits that dirt path and nature itself seems to align with their destiny. The rain sprouts those hidden mustard seeds at this unnatural, hyper-fast speed, turning Ayesha's tiny, almost invisible clues into an impossible-to-miss, glowing, bright, yellow road of blooming flowers leading directly out of the deep jungle.
And this brilliantly illustrates the payoff. Safia sees these yellow flowers and instantly knows, that's it! That's the sign Aisha promised. She follows this magical floral trail straight out of the wilderness and right up to the massive gates of the royal palace. There she is warmly welcomed and joyfully reunited with her sister Aisha, who is now officially the queen of the realm. And to tie up the final loose end nicely, the king and queen arrange for Safia to be married to the very same wazir who first stumbled upon their hut. It all culminates in a glorious double royal wedding. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought. Can human cruelty ever truly rewrite what destiny has planned? We've just explored a story where a stepmother's intense malice and a father's cowardly betrayal were quite literally meant to destroy Aisha and Safia. But instead of ending their lives, those exact terrible actions were the specific vehicles that drove these discarded sisters out of their village, into the jungle, and right onto their royal thrones. It's an incredibly powerful reminder of resilience and the unstoppable force of Takdir. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really hope this leaves you thinking about the totally unexpected paths our own destinies might take.